Okay. Hey guys, my name is Gabriella Thorne and I'll be moderating the conversation today. So I'll just introduce myself and then the rest of the panelists can introduce themselves as well. So I'm a sophomore at the college. I currently live in Cabot House and I'm concentrating in African American studies. So if you guys can introduce yourself, we'll start with Andrea, then Claire, and then Jasmine.
Hi everyone, my name's Andrea. I'm a junior in Kirkland House. I'm from California originally. I study history and science, and I'm pre-med with a secondary in psych.
Okay, hey everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Claire, and I'm a sophomore from Toronto, Canada, living in Winthrop House, and I'm studying social studies.
Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine. I'm a senior in Lowell House. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and I study government with a secondary in African American studies.
Okay. Awesome. So if you guys don't have any questions yet, I guess we can maybe start talking a little bit about Housing Day that's coming up. Andrea, do you want to start talking about that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess maybe first we can talk a little bit about how getting assigned a roommate your first year works and build up to Housing Day. So sometime in early summer, maybe even spring, you'll be asked to fill out a housing questionnaire, and on there are maybe 10 to 20 questions like what time do you go to bed, are you messy, what kind of music do you like, and then you're also able to fill out a short paragraph or two about kind of the environment that you want to live in, whether you want it to be more social, whether you want it to be more of a study space, if you're interested in some sort of foreign language that you'd like to practice with your roommate, you can write stuff like that on your housing app. And then from there, they'll actually hand match you with roommates. So you're not allowed to pick your dorm or your roommate, but I think that works out really well for most people. I lived with 5 girls my freshman year, including myself, and 3 of us still live together. So I would say that they do a pretty good job at matching you your freshman year. And then if someone wants to talk about kind of Housing Day next.
Claire, do you want to hit us off with that?
Oh, yes. I love to talk about Housing Day, and I think the fun of it is in freshman year you make a lot of good friends, from your roommates to people involved in your classes and in your clubs, and when Housing Day comes around you form what's called a blocking group. So a blocking group can be one person alone or it can be up to 8 people, and the idea is that all of you are banded together, sorted together, and you'll definitely be living in the same house next year. So there are 12 upperclassmen houses. The lottery is completely random, and after you submit your blocking group and name your blocking group, so my blocking group is Block Obama, because we thought we were so funny, but there are some pretty good ones. Then on Housing Day, which is actually coming up for us this Thursday, you get sorted into your house, but I'll let someone else explain how that happens.
Jasmine, you want to kick us off with that part?
Yeah, so getting started into a house is all random, but it's a super fun process. So basically you find out, I think it's this week Thursday,
Yes.
the freshmen will find out which house they were sorted into, and basically all the upperclassmen from the different houses will come and storm the freshman yard early in the morning at like 6:30 or 7 a.m. and bang on your door, and you'll be with your blockmates or the people that you decided you want to live with for the next 3 years. And you'll find out which house that you can sort into. And then for the rest of the day, you're invited to different events at your upperclassmen house. So you can get to know the new faculty deans, the new tutors, and the rest of the other freshmen that have also been sorted into your house, as well as some upperclassmen. So it's a really, really fun time, both for the freshmen and for the upperclassmen that get to kind of present you with your house.
Yeah, and the cool thing about your house is that is where you're living for the next 3 years when you're here on campus. So you do a lot of different things in your house. Each house has housing traditions. You'll eat in your house. You'll do your laundry in your house. So the house is just a great way to meet other people and just a great place to be. So and just a reminder to everyone that feel free to submit any questions that you want. Ooh, we have a question. So well, it depends who has lived in a single. So what is it like to live in a singles freshman year? Are all singles part of a suite? Did any of you guys live in a single?
I lived in a single that was within a suite, so it was kind of the best of both worlds. So I had my own room, but I also was really close to my other roommates because we lived like a foot away from each other.
Yeah.
I think that I know of, there are no standalone freshman singles. So if you're in a single, chances are you'll be within a suite. So that's kind of nice. Like you get your privacy, but you also kind of have a little.
Actually, we do have a dorm that has standalone singles, but that's mainly Hurlbut. But typically, your singles are within a suite. I lived in a double my freshman year. And actually, Claire, this one's perfect for you. So,
Woo.
any advice for an international student about the transition from high school to college life in the United States?
Okay, so I'm from Canada, so I do count as international, though I would confess the culture shock probably isn't as great for Canadians as it is for other people from different countries. But two things that I think are really important to highlight. The first is that Harvard has a really great community for international students. So I believe around 10% of the undergraduate population is international, and the Woodbridge Society, you can check out their website, is truly wonderful with all these events. So you know that you have a community on campus with people who can really connect with you in that sense. The second thing I'd say is that there's a really great program called FIP, the Freshman International Program, which happens, it's like one of the pre-orientation programs which lasts for a week before school starts in August, and it is a fantastic, highly recommended program for all internationals to get basically a crash course in American culture, what they can expect living in the States. I think that it's really hard to give advice for all international students because everyone comes from such a unique country with unique backgrounds. Obviously, if you have specific questions, feel free, and Gabby will mention our email later, but feel free to email us, and we're more than happy to put you in touch with someone from your country to give you really good, tailored feedback. But I think one thing I would just quickly say before passing this off is that the weather is something that should, it's universal and it should be acknowledged by all, even Americans who aren't from a region that's this far north. But just be prepared, make sure you have all the right outfits and like the clothing, because that's something that's really, really difficult to deal with and that you can't really fix once you get here. Anything else, pretty adaptable, I'd say.
Okay. And actually, speaking of pre-orientation programs, like you mentioned, one student, Dhruv Gupta, has a question about how are FAP, FUP, and FOP. Did any of you guys do any of those other three programs? I mean, I was a FUP leader, so it's a very different experience for me since I was never a FUPPy. But were any of you guys part of those pre-orientation programs and want to talk about that?
I didn't do any of the orientation programs.
That's totally fine. So the one thing I can say, like, I know FAP was just a really great, well, all the pre-orientation programs are just really great because it's just a great way to meet new students. I did dorm crew when I was coming in because I wanted to make money, and it was a way to just meet a lot of different students very quickly. I had a roommate who did FOP, and she said she just got to know a very small
I
group of
did FOP.
students. Oh, you
I was
did do FOP?
hiding. I was like, I just spoke. I can't speak again.
Girl, speak about it. Go ahead.
Just like really quickly, it's an experience. You think it's gentle hiking. I was like, I'm not the fittest person in the world, but you know what? It'll be fine. It's intensive backpacking, but the nice thing is you don't need to have done backpacking in the past at all. And I personally think it is one of the best ways to have a community in coming to campus because you've seen these people at their worst, 6 days, no showering in the mountains of New Hampshire, and you bond. And we were speaking of blocking groups, a lot of blocking groups are based on FOC groups. And I think that's just one thing that stands for how great the program is.
Okay. Yeah, all the pre-orientation programs are great. It's just about finding your fit. So Jessica has a question about class size. So are there small classes right off the bat, or are many freshman classes larger lecture ones? Jasmine, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so what's great about being a freshman is that you have access to freshman seminars, and those are limited enrollment classes where you'll have no more than I think it's 15 to 20 students in your class with a preceptor. And I took one my freshman year. It was amazing. It was on the laws of war and terrorism, and I really got to know a lot about the subject from someone who was really well versed in it. And it's also a great transition to get you to learn, how do you participate in a small class? Like, what is it like to speak in front of your other classmates? How do you get to know a professor one-on-one? So yeah, highly recommend the small freshman seminars. But then even when you start taking your concentration classes, which can be large at some points, especially if you're a pre-med, for example, and you're taking a science class, it's really popular. But what's great about that is that any classes that are over 40 students are required to have a section. And sections are smaller breakdowns where you'll meet with a grad student who can kind of go through more of the one-on-one questions you might have and really break down what was talked about in lecture in a more hands-on way. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, I say, with classes at Harvard.
Okay. Yeah, and speaking of concentration, Ethan Ambrose asks, would you guys say that it is okay to declare your concentration during freshman year and furthermore take classes in your concentration as a first-year student? Andrea, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So that I know of, I think you're not able to declare until sophomore year. It's kind of a big, I guess, holiday that we call declaration. Was it called Declaration of Concentration? And so the reason for that is that Harvard really believes in its liberal arts philosophy, and they don't want you to necessarily feel like you are tied into one path. They really want to encourage you and make it a safe space for you to explore things that maybe you have never taken a class in but are interested in, and that might turn into a concentration. It might just turn out to be one class that you thought was fun and you end up sticking with your kind of original idea. But you're not really able to declare until your second year here in the fall. I will say that you probably will end up taking some classes that will count towards your concentration your first year, just because freshmen are kind of usually in pretty general classes, whether, if you're in LPSA, which is intro, like Gen Chem, that will count for a wide variety of science concentrations, or like Humanities 10 could count for a wide variety of concentrations. So you don't really need to think about kind of fulfilling concentration requirements your first year. You'll probably end up, with the exploring that you're doing, some of them will end up counting, but it's usually not intentional.
Yeah, and just for reference, I was basically undecided until like a month before the concentration deadline, so it is totally fine if you don't know what you're going to study or what you want to do here. So one popular question from Rebecca is, have any of you guys studied abroad?
Yeah, so I actually studied abroad for a semester my junior spring. I was in Cape Town, and I took classes at the University of Cape Town. It was a really great process, really easy process, and a great experience. Basically, the process was that I just had to decide which class I wanted to take, and then get approval for my concentration. And even better, my financial aid that I have on campus transferred to my financial aid abroad. So I ended up actually paying less money to study abroad than I would if I had stayed on campus. So it was a really great experience. I was fully immersed in Cape Town culture for an entire semester. And so I would highly recommend that all of you guys take the opportunity to study abroad while you're here. If not for the term time, definitely for the summer, because we definitely have a lot of opportunities to do that as well.
Okay. And another question about study abroad is, how hard is it to get into one of the summer study abroad programs, and how hard is it to find funding? Did anyone study abroad during the summer or have any experience with this? If not, that is also totally fine. I guess depending on the difficulty and how hard it is, I think it really just depends on country, just because they try to make it a fairly reasonable sized group that they're taking. So it really just depends on the popularity of the country, but there are also so many different study abroad programs you can apply for. Like, there's the Harvard Summer School study abroad programs. You can apply to study abroad programs that aren't a part of Harvard. You can do internships abroad, so you have so many different opportunities. So even if, let's say, one study abroad program you're looking at is a little bit more popular, you can have so many, like, 4 other options at your disposal. And in terms of
Oh my God.
Yeah, you're allowed to apply to 2 Harvard study abroad programs, and then you can also petition for like non-Harvard study abroad programs to count for credit. So that just takes a little bit more organization. But if you want to be abroad during the summer, there's definitely a strong chance you'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
And then regarding funding, does anyone want to?
Okay, so my understanding of funding is that the Office of Career Services has really good funding programs. I think some of them prioritize juniors and seniors who are like in their last years of being able to take advantage of the program, but a lot of juniors and seniors actually are in internships at that point. So I think most of it does get trickled down to sophomores and freshmen. And almost every single person I've spoken to who got into a study abroad program did get funding. And I think if you don't, there's like multiple other sources specific to different regions that you can look for. And I think one other quick thing I would say is that if you really want to travel internationally, but you don't think you're ready to commit a semester or the summer, Harvard has a ton of other programs that really facilitate this. And it's really based on any region in the world. So I think I was chatting with Jasmine earlier, and she's been to Dubai for a week with Harvard, and I'm spending spring break in Rome for Harvard Model Congress. So throwing a conference and then having having the flights covered by the club essentially, and then being able to travel all over the country and get a feel for that. So whether you're interested in Asia or Europe or Latin America, there are a lot of really cool programs that you should definitely look into.
Okay. So one question I see here that I think would be applicable for all of us is, how is multicultural life on campus? And I know we're all involved in the multicultural scene in some shape, way, or form. So maybe, Andrea, you can start us off with that?
Yeah, sure. So for me personally, I didn't really see myself joining a cultural group at first, but I'm from a town that's like about half white, half Mexican, roughly. Um, I was always used to being around a good amount of people that kind of share the same background as me. So I was like, oh, I don't think I'll need to join that in college. But come probably the end of my fall semester of freshman year, I realized that that is actually something that I wanted to be a part of on campus. So I first started going to a group called Latinas Unidas. Most cultural groups meet like once a week over dinner to have some sort of discussion or bonding activity, something like that. And I eventually started getting more and more involved, and I ended up serving on Fuerza Latina board with Gabby last year as historian, and that was definitely a lot of fun, you know, organizing events like dinners or guest speakers, outings to build community among Harvard Latinos. So I really enjoyed that, and I think other people are involved in kind of different groups.
Yeah. Maybe, Jasmine, you want to speak on your experience, because I know it's probably definitely different from Andrea's.
Yeah, so since my freshman year, I've been involved with the Association of Black Harvard Women. Yeah, which Gabby's also a part of. My sophomore year, I was their action committee chair, so I did a lot of programming around different political issues, both on campus and off campus, that spoke to the needs of Black women, and organized events on campus pertaining to those issues. It was a really great experience. I was able to fuse my kind of academic political interests with, you know, my Black identity as a woman as well. And it was really great. You get to meet a lot of new people that you might not necessarily see in your classes or even in your dorm. And I would say that for sure some of my closest friends I've met through ABWA, and also the Association of Black Harvard, or the Black Students Association, BSA.
And maybe, Claire, you want to provide a little bit of your experience with multicultural groups?
Yeah, so I've been a part of the Asian American Association's board since freshman year, and I just like to echo everybody, think that it's one of the best ways to find a community on campus of people who share similar values and who are just really fun. So AAA throws parties, we do education, political events, we have sibling families where we all go out to Chinatown and eat dim sum. So I think it's really important that we have these strong and vibrant cultural communities, because it really helps define our identity as Harvard students and engage everybody in part of the conversation. So it's something that definitely really matters to me.
Okay, awesome. So one question that Jessica has for us is, how easy is it to get involved with undergraduate research, especially with no prior research experience? So maybe, Andrea, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm kind of maybe a little bit of an atypical pre-med. I actually haven't done any research, but a lot of my friends have. I'm just like personally not interested in the research side of things, much more on the practicing side of things. But it's really easy to get involved with undergraduate research. We actually have more research positions open than we have students to fill them. So you can definitely get in a lab your freshman fall. One of my lab partners in one of my classes is a freshman, and she started looking the summer before getting here. You don't have to do that, but that might help. And you kind of work your way up in a lab, so you might start, you know, just kind of stalking things, and then they'll assign you little projects, teach you how to use more machinery. That's kind of more the science base. There's also a lot of social science research you can get involved in. The Radcliffe Institute is a really good way to do that. Professors basically have postings of like, this is the research that I'm doing for this academic year, and I need 1 or 2 research assistants. So you can look for professors that are doing the same kinds of things you're interested in, and kind of helping them, you know, write a book or something like that, I think is really cool. And you get paid for all of these things. So it's definitely easy to get involved as a freshman in research.
Okay. Has anyone done research that maybe is not related to STEM, or even if it is STEM related? Maybe Jasmine or Claire. If not, totally fine as well.
I haven't done any academic research, but I am a research assistant for Harvard's Hip Hop Archive, which is a little bit different. Yeah, so that's kind of a cool way to be a research assistant for a topic that might not fall into a class or an academic subject. And I've gotten a lot out of it. I work on doing a lot of kind of archival research for the archive. So right now, looking at Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, her album, and looking at the sampling in that album and kind of compiling all that information for the archive's records. So that's kind of a unique example of research, but just going to show kind of the wide variety and spectrum of opportunities on campus.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry, one question that I saw here from Akshaya. How feasible is it to do a joint concentration between disparate fields and undertake interdisciplinary research? I don't think any of us are doing joints, but maybe Claire, you could speak a little bit about how is it doing a joint concentration, sorry.
Yeah, so since I am not doing one, I might be getting some of the details mixed up. But to the best of my understanding, if you do a joint concentration, so you have to make sure both concentrations allow that. You speak to them first. And what ends up happening is it's possible to take classes in both departments. That's not the concern. It's more that you have to write a thesis that is able to link the two joint concentrations. And I think that speaks to how at Harvard, like a lot of the work we do is interdisciplinary. And if you're going to really focus on two avenues, you have to be able to connect them in some way. So I think that's the biggest struggle, because if you're really doing something like environmental studies and then African American studies, there's probably overlap, but you have to have a passion that can find that. And I actually have a really good friend who is environmental studies and something else, which was, I can't name it. I think, it's some sort of engineering. And I think she's the only person at the college who's doing this. She jumped through all the paperwork and she really loves it. And she's done really, really cool things. So if you come in here with a passion and you're inspired, you should definitely feel free to pursue that. Just know that it does come with that tough thesis at the end where you have to combine both subjects.
Good. So Anne-Lee has a question. If you could go back and redo your freshman year, is there anything you would have done differently? Maybe Jasmine, you want to speak about that now that you're a senior and soon are going to be off?
That is, yeah, I feel like I have to think back to a different lifetime. If I was a freshman, what would I do differently? I think I would have just soaked in freshman year more and taken advantage of a lot more of the fun opportunities on campus, so hearing different cool lecturers speak or going to the variety of different events. Sometimes you feel like you need to come in and know what you want to do and pursue it, so you don't really have the time to just kind of soak in and fall into the Harvard experience. So I think I would have taken a little bit of a slower pace my freshman year and not tried to have everything planned out so that I could enjoy some of the smaller things.
Sounds good. Anyone else have anything they want to say that they could have done differently the freshman year?
Yeah, I would have just slept more. Like now, as a junior, I sleep midnight to 8 a.m., 8 hours every night, and I find that there is still enough time in the day to get all of my work done and work out. And it's definitely, I think, something that you just learn to manage, a college workload, a more free schedule that you're really in charge of. But my freshman year, there were some nights where I was, sleeping from 2:30 to 8 a.m. for a few days in a row, and I would feel sick to my stomach because I just wasn't getting enough sleep. And I wasn't making it high enough of a priority. But now as a junior, I realized how important it is to get good sleep. So I would definitely go back and change that.
Yeah. So one popular question here by Isabella is, what's the food like on campus? Claire, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So all the food in the dining halls, which includes Annenberg, the freshman dining hall, and all of the 12 upperclassmen houses, is done by the Harvard University Dining Services. And I think probably HUD's greatest strength is how diverse the menu is. So it's really pretty interesting. They have multiple apps so you can go online to see what we're actually eating. So if you guys are curious, you should feel free to go look at that right now, Google HUDs. But you can actually have, there's a salad bar, there's a really great grill, entrees every day. They really take pains to switch it up. And I think, food at college is food at college. It's not gourmet. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. You won't always go down and be like, I can't wait to eat my dining hall food. But I think that more often, and that's to be brutally honest, but I think more often than not, I sometimes walk into HUDs and I'm like, wow, there's this really cool tofu thing. And as someone who actually enjoys tofu, it's really exciting. And I think that at the end of the day, HUDs is wonderful in the sense that we have unlimited meal plan swipe, so you can just keep going back, keep eating, and I mean, I take advantage of that more often than not. And one last thing I would say before maybe passing off to someone else is that we have this really cool thing called Board Plus, where I believe you have $65 every semester, and you can spend that at various cafes around campus. So if one day the dining hall food really isn't what you're looking for, you go to the cafe and you get chicken fingers. So definitely lots of ways to swap things up.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak on that? Okay. So we actually have two questions about language here. So one is, do you think it's a good idea to start learning a whole new language at Harvard? And the other is, are any of you guys pursuing more than one language? If so, has it been easy to juggle them with all of your other classes? So has anyone started a whole new language here or is pursuing more than one that would like to speak?
So I wouldn't necessarily say I was pursuing a new language, but I did want to get a good foundation of the language, the native language they speak in Cape Town before I went. So I took a semester of Isinkhosa, which is their native language. And the crazy, amazing thing about Harvard is that they have, I think it's right now, 20 different African languages that you can take. And it's fantastic because you really wouldn't get that experience anywhere else. So was in a class, I was the only undergraduate student with 3 other grad students and our preceptor. And so we met twice a week, and I kind of learned the basic fundamentals. And it was a really great intro so that when I did go abroad, I could kind of show that I had tried to learn something about the culture before I went there. And I remember some of it now even. So even though I'm not taking it now, it was just kind of a good, really fun semester-long course. It just kind of speaks to the different language opportunities you do have at Harvard.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to Ethan's question. I personally am only pursuing Spanish here, which is also my native language, but I have a friend actually who is pre-med, but is concentrating in Romance languages, so he studies French, Spanish, and Portuguese, and he has a citation in Chinese. So it's definitely possible to pursue many different languages. He did have a background in Spanish, French, and Chinese before coming here, so I guess Portuguese is kind of the one that he's picked up along the way. But I think if you kind of have an interest for language and a kind of natural talent, it's not too difficult to juggle, especially like if he has an extra challenge in that he's pre-med and Romance languages, which doesn't have any sort of overlap. But if you are looking to concentrate on something that also has a language component to it, it's not too hard to kind of juggle. I think the only uniquely hard thing about languages, especially the intro, is that they meet every day of the week pretty much, whereas other classes meet 1 to 3 times a week. So it's a little bit more time intensive.
Yeah, definitely agree. So a question by Jenny Lou is like, in your opinion, what is the hardest thing about going to Harvard? And maybe all of you guys can actually give a little snippet about that, but Andrea, do you want to continue talking?
Yeah, sure. So I think that the hardest part of coming here is something that you have to get over pretty quickly or else you won't be very happy, and that's that, I mean, all of you are super accomplished and really talented people, and so for me, I went to a pretty underperforming high school, and then I came here where everyone is intelligent, accomplished, like has passion, so it's easy to kind of feel overwhelmed and compare yourself to others and feel like maybe you don't measure up in some sort of way. And I think I was maybe in that mindset for like a few weeks, a month, but then I was like, you know what, like I'm not going to be happy here for the rest of my time if I'm always comparing myself to other people. So I kind of learned more to look to my classmates for inspiration in terms of like, whoa, it's so cool that like Gabby is so heavily involved in all of these cultural organizations and is, you know, a blogger. I admire that in her, kind of a thing. And just like you think everyone else is awesome, people think that you're awesome too. So just kind of learning to rewire how you think about your classmates' accomplishments, I think is really important.
Yeah. Maybe Claire, you want to say a little thing about that?
Sure. And I definitely echo what Andrea just said. And I think that being overwhelmed comes from the people around you, but also the sheer amount of opportunity available here. I think hopefully most of you will be able to come to visit us. We're very excited to meet you. And what you'll find is that we have an activities fair, which is just crazy. You walk in, there are tons of clubs screaming at you, come join this, try this. And the nice thing about Harvard is you can totally pick up a new hobby that you never could do in high school. But what's overwhelming about that is then suddenly you've signed up for 20 organizations and you're taking 4 reasonably difficult classes for freshman year, and you're just like, now what do I do with myself? So I think I am still struggling to balance my extracurriculars. I think I'm probably overcommitted at the moment. It's something I recognize and something that I'm working with. But like definitely I think this doesn't mean that when you come here in the first few weeks you shouldn't try out everything that interests you, but it is important at some point, maybe in like November, October, to just reassess what you're doing and realize that everything has an opportunity cost. You do something, you give up something else. And the thing at Harvard is the thing you're giving up is so great and so exciting that you just feel like you can't bear to. But we only have so much time. Sleep is important, as has already been mentioned. So don't let your health and like your happiness, I guess, suffer as a result of that.
Yeah, and maybe Jasmine,
Yeah,
from a
sure.
senior's perspective.
Definitely. I think time management is really important, and that's kind of similar to what Claire and Andrea both said. But yeah, you want to make sure that, one, you're getting time for sleep, and you also have personal time to hang out with your friends, go out on the weekends, spend time alone if that's what you want to do. Make sure that you're not overwhelmed with class, work if you work outside, if you have like a term time job, for example, we all do, and extracurricular activities. You want to make sure that you structure your day in a way that feels like you're making progress, but also that you're not just working from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And it's really different than high school in the sense that your day isn't planned for you, so you don't, go to school at 8:15 and leave at 3:15. You make your own schedule. You choose when your classes are. There might be days when you don't have class at all, but you still want to make sure that you're not just necessarily laying in bed all day and then you wait till the last minute to write your paper. So time management is a difficult skill, but you kind of get the hang of it because you basically have to.
Okay, and this question would be more specifically probably for Andrea, but speaking of a not-so-good high school, how can one make sure that one is well-prepared, at least academic-wise?
Yeah, so I think the really nice thing about Harvard is that they have placement exams. So in the summer, you all have to take, I think, a placement exam in English, like a writing sample, and then I think they make you at least take biology and math or something. Then there's also like chem and physics if you're thinking that you're going to pursue those classes. And from there, they'll actually tell you kind of the level that they think you should be at. So that's helpful so that you don't get overwhelmed and you don't start off kind of in over your head. But what's also nice about it is that it's flexible. So for example, I got placed into kind of, I guess, the harder Gen Chem class, but I was like, it's like my first semester of college. I don't want to overwhelm myself, so I ended up taking the kind of more straightforward, less application-based class. And they let me do that, and that was really helpful. And you also have 5 weeks in the beginning of every semester of what's called add drop, where you can kind of move between different levels or make sure that your class load is balanced. So I think it's not so much about being well prepared because everyone comes in at different kind of starting points, but just making sure that you're in the right class for you. And there's no shame in kind of starting lower at all. So.
And I think 2 questions that are actually related, not to this one, but one is, how have y'all fulfilled the student work requirement during your time, and how difficult is work study at Harvard? Maybe Jasmine, since you work with the Harvard Financial Aid Initiative, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there are so many different opportunities to work on campus, and essentially it's up to each student if they decide to do that or not. If you have money saved up from the summer, for example, then you might not necessarily have to work during the term time to pay for your student contribution, but if you do want additional spending money during the semester, there are so many options available to you. So for example, I work for the Financial Aid Office, and like I mentioned previously, I also work for Harvard's Hip Hop Archive. So that just kind of gives you a sense of the different opportunities there are on campus for jobs. Again, research positions are also available. Students typically work between 7 and 12 hours a week, although jobs vary. So there are some jobs where you only have to work up to 2 hours, and some jobs that might require maybe 10 hours a week, for example. But it's all up to you and what you can fit into your schedule. I definitely didn't take on my second job until I was a junior and had kind of figured out my schedule a little bit more. But yeah, it's all up to what you can fit into your schedule, and a lot of times students will pick their academic classes first and then apply for jobs so they know when they have their free time.
Okay. Yeah, and just a reminder, we have about another 10 to 15 minutes, so get in any of those last-minute questions. But one question may be clear, you can answer this from Drew. When do most classes start? Or more vaguely, what's a typical day in your life like?
Oh man, let's get authentic. I will pull up my Google Calendar, and I will just tell you guys what is on the schedule for today. This is, I think, a pretty typical day for me. So I try not to have 9 a.m. classes, but this is one of the ones that's more necessary for my concentration and my focus field, which involves economics. So I have macroeconomics from 9 to 10 a.m., wake up early, and then right after that, from 10 to 11 a.m., I have American Economic Policy, which is a really cool class taught by Professor Feldstein, Professor Summers, and Professor Lehman, who advised, and I might get the order wrong, but I believe it was Reagan, Bush, and then Obama. So lots of really cool people in one classroom. They lecture really well. And then I have some free time, so I grab lunch generally around 12. And then I have social psychology from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And that's the end of my classes, my lectures, because from 3 to 4 p.m. I have section, which is, as we mentioned, small groups. So social psych is a big class, and I have that for an hour, 3 to 4. 4 to 5, I came back to my room and I took a nap. And then at 5 to 6, I have you guys, which is very exciting. And then I'm going to study for my exam on Wednesday, but then at 7 p.m. I'm meeting with a friend to go eat out, and the cost is covered by one of my clubs, so that's 7 to 8, and then 8, 1 hour more of studying. So you see the studying is fit in over the course of the day. It's not one huge block. 9 to 10 p.m. I have a board meeting for the Harvard College Consulting Group, which is one of my organizations. So you can see meetings also get really late sometimes, and then from probably 11 to 1, I will be also studying for my exam. Day in the life, literally.
And maybe speaking of classes, Eli asked, what are your opinions of the Gen Ed program, and what have you all heard about the new program that they're going to introduce? So maybe you guys can talk about a cool Gen Ed class that you had. Maybe Andrea, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the new program because I didn't read the email that they sent out, but I will talk about a cool class, I guess, that I've taken. So I'm history and science, I'm pre-med, but for my Societies of the World class, I got to take a class called Moctezuma's Mexico, Then and Now, which doesn't fit into my kind of academic focus at all, but it was super interesting. It was with a great professor, like definitely a leader in the field of kind of Aztec and Mayan research, and all about his trips to go like excavate things down there, and I actually got to take him with one of my other roommates that was in the class and the other professor from that class to freshman faculty dinner. So I got to know him pretty well, and now I'm in his wife's class. So kind of the Gen Ed program, I think, has kind of opened kind of cool avenues for me that I wouldn't have probably necessarily taken without it. I personally haven't found it cumbersome to fulfill. I've probably fulfilled 5 of the 8 requirements just with classes I had to take anyway, and then kind of got to go a little bit out of my way for the other 3, but they've been pretty enjoyable and not particularly intimidating because they're meant to be intro level.
Yeah, I think that's a really good overview. So Salma has a question about what exactly is blocking. So maybe Jasmine, you want to talk about blocking groups and how that works?
Yeah, so blocking essentially happens during the spring semester of your freshman year, and you get to choose up to 7 other students that you want to live with or that you want to be in your same upperclassman house. And then in addition to that, your blocking group can pick another blocking group that you want to link with, and that will ensure that they're in your same neighborhood, for example. So the houses are kind of clustered into different neighborhoods, and so that 8-person blocking group will be in your same general vicinity, so that you know that you'll have friends that are close by. And then that's a general process, and again, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but on housing day is when you find out what house your blocking group and your linking group have been put into.
All right, and we actually have another financial aid question, so maybe you can also answer this as well, Jasmine. As a student on financial aid, is the personal expenses stipend the same as the money you get from term time jobs?
So there's no amount of money that you directly get from your term time job. So like you get a paycheck basically every week, but it's not necessarily a lump sum that you'll get at the beginning of the semester. The personal expenses is just supposed to be kind of a guide as to how much you can expect things are going to cost, so that you know about how many hours you should work or how much money you should have during the semester to meet those expenses. But it's all kind of a ballpark range.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to clear up about the financial aid letter, that like the travel expenses, like academic expenses and personal expenses, that's not money that's like factored in your financial aid package and then will be like deposited in your bank account. That's just how much they expect that you'll be spending, and just so that like you can kind of budget accordingly, and if you find a job to cover it.
Right.
Okay, one fairly popular question by David Joseph is, if there was one thing you could change about Harvard, what would it be? And he also says, thanks for doing this. So maybe, Claire, you want to start with that? I know it's always a very difficult question, but you want to...
Okay, I will attempt it. This probably requires more thought for me to give a more accurate response, but I think something which has been a discussion on campus and should be acknowledged is how social spaces are panning out. And I think the nice thing about Harvard is I feel in general like I like my social life. I love my friends. I love the clubs I'm in. But I do think that since Harvard is an older institution, we weren't built in 1636 with the intention of having a big space on campus where like a bunch of students could throw huge parties in an extremely convenient manner. So I think that right now there is an initiative by the undergraduate dean, which is Dean Rakesh Khurana, to move more social spaces into upperclassmen houses. And I think that this is something that's definitely a step in the right direction. So I think this change is happening as we speak. But I do think that social life on campus would benefit if you were able to meet more people who aren't outside of the circles of your roommates, your blockmates, your extracurriculars, and who's studying in your classes. So I think that's probably one thing I would mention.
Maybe, Andrea, you want to say one thing you would change?
Yeah, sure. And I think this is something that I just read an article in the Crimson on it today, just kind of diversifying classes more and also faculty. I'd really like to see a lot more Latino and Black professors. There has been semesters where I've had 4 white males as my professors, and it's kind of hard to identify with that, but I think that there's good movement being generated kind of around changing that, and also diversifying the curriculum in terms of like getting Latino studies to actually be its own concentration, and kind of getting a different perspective other than the Western perspective.
Same with Asian American studies. I heard a really good slam poem at an event just yesterday actually about why that's important too.
Yeah, and maybe Jasmine, as a senior, what would your one thing you would change?
I was actually going to echo Andrea and basically say the same thing that she said about having more faculty of color and making sure that curriculum are intersectional. So I'm a Gov concentrator, and a lot of my classes on government structures are from a very kind of Anglo-European framework, and I would love to see more diversity within that curriculum specifically.
Yeah, I basically echo everything you guys have said. So we'll take 2 more questions. So one that I think is fairly important is there a lot of interaction between Harvard students and other college students within close proximity? Maybe, Claire, you want to take that question on?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. And I think for me personally, the answer is no, in the sense that I have visited a friend at MIT before. But I do think these things vary in that, do you come into Harvard with a lot of friends in the neighboring areas because you are from Massachusetts, which is really likely for a lot of people. In my case, not a lot of Torontonians came to Boston, so I'm afraid that I didn't have that network. But I think most of the interaction that does happen is often with mixers between different clubs. So I know our Asian American Association is going to mix with the MIT Asian American Association soon. And I believe the Black Students Association has a party every year where a lot of students from the surrounding schools come. So it's not like it can't happen, and you can definitely meet a lot of really cool people. It's more that it's something you have to go look for if you didn't come in with those connections. But I personally think that everyone on this campus is already crazy and wonderful enough to occupy most of my time, which is why I haven't gone out searching. But you can definitely do that if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah. So this will actually be the last question, and any other questions you have, you can feel free to email us, and I'll give you guys all our email addresses. So this was similar to one of the questions that we asked earlier. Is there anything that you wish your tour guide told you before coming to Harvard, and maybe, since we're Harvard students now, maybe any piece of advice we would want to give on to these, hopefully, prospective Harvard students here? Maybe Andrea, you want to start with that?
I think this might be college in general. I don't think it's just Harvard, but your kind of high school friendships inevitably will kind of fade out a little bit because you're in this new place, like you're trying to get to know people, trying to balance 4 classes, new extracurriculars, that it can be easy to forget to kind of text your friends from home, make time to FaceTime them and stuff like that, and it might happen a lot in the beginning and then drop off, but I would just say that like that's natural and it happens to most people, but at least for me, what's nice is that when I go home we can kind of pick up right where we left off, even if we're not kind of talking day to day. And for me that's kind of magnified because I'm from California, so the 3-hour time difference kind of does make it hard to find mutual times that work for me and my friends to catch up.
Yeah. Claire?
I think that one thing that's really important is to not be as shy as you might want to be and to talk to people. I think that sometimes when you come to Harvard, you are intimidated because everyone here is so intelligent and so well-spoken and so thoughtful. But I think the biggest advantage a freshman can have is just to talk to upperclassmen and ask them what courses they took, what they enjoyed, what should I do, like social opportunities, right? Or just who I want to meet. And like, I think that looking back, I wish as a freshman that I'd done a little bit more of that. I think my freshman year turned out great, but there's word of mouth, colloquial advice that you can't get from checking blogs or checking websites. So even if you're the shyest person in the world, realize that all the upperclassmen here want to get to know you. And I don't think anyone is as excited as we are during Visitas when you guys all come and it's super hype and the energy is great. So just like take that opportunity and reach out and ask people questions, and you'll make some great friends, maybe some mentors, and that will be a huge asset in the long run.
And last but not least, Jasmine?
Yeah, so I would definitely emphasize trying new things. So I think, you know, you're really excelling. Obviously, you excelled in high school, and so you might want to just keep that trajectory going forward in college. But it's okay to, like, not be the best at something and try something new that you may never have experienced before. And so, you know, like Claire mentioned, we have 450 different clubs on campus. And so say you've never, you know, tried pottery before, try pottery. Even if you're not the best person at it, it's still a really fun experience. And you might find something new that you really love that you wouldn't have opened yourself up to before.
Yeah. And just before we finish this, I think we should all just describe the programs we're at and how you guys can reach us. So Andrea, if you want to start talking just very briefly about UMRP.
Yeah, so I work for the Undergraduate Minority Recruitment Program. We're a resource really for all students to ask questions about student life, financial aid, everything, but with a multicultural kind of focus. We have 11 coordinators that you can reach out to. Our email is umrp@fas.harvard.edu. If you have a question for me specifically, you can just address it to me and I'll be the one answering. And you can also just kind of address it to the general UMRP and we'd be more than happy to answer your question.
Sounds good. And maybe Claire, you can talk a little bit about Harvard College Connection, which Claire and I both work for.
Yeah, so the Harvard College Connection is probably the most general of the programs in the sense that if anybody from any background has any questions, I think that any is just a very common term for us, hit us up and we're more than happy to link you to the right people if we don't know the answers or provide some insight. So Gabby, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe our email is harvardconnection, one word, at g.harvard.edu. Yes?
Yes, you got it.
Yes, so email us. Email me or Gabby, or there's 6 of us and we're all great, so more than happy to help.
Yeah. And Jasmine, talk a little bit about H5 and where we can reach you at.
Yeah, so I work for the Harvard Financial Aid Initiative with 7 other undergraduate students, and we do a lot of work around recruiting low-income, high-achieving students and also providing resources on campus for current students on financial aid. So if you have any financial aid questions, you can definitely contact us at hfai@fas.harvard.edu.
Okay. And last but not least, there's the Harvard First Gen program. Unfortunately, none of them could make it today due to schedule conflicts, but they're just a program to help first gen students just figure out everything they need to know about Harvard and just like what life here is as a first generation college student. So if you would like to reach them, you could reach them at harvardfirstgenprogram@gmail.com. So thank you guys all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed. So if you have any questions for literally any of us, feel free to email us at any of the 4 emails. You can also find our emails on the website. And I wish you guys luck with the rest of your senior year.
Yay!
Bye.
Bye, guys.